Hello and welcome to the Moms Who Know podcast. I'm your host, Chanel Nielsen, talking today about kids and allowance. It's a big conversation and something that a lot of us think about, how we want to handle this issue of money with our kids. So to start off with, I'll tell you a few different things. We've done a few different things throughout the years. One of the things that we've done is to give our kids a small allowance, to just give them, some spending money that we hand them at the beginning of each month and let them spend as they will, and we don't really worry about what that gets spent on. Another thing that we've done is to have allowances based on chores, and we see how many chores they've done, and we give them an allowance based off of, that amount of work that they've done. For me growing up, my parents pretty much would pay for everything. If I went to a birthday party or needed clothes or even wanted to go buy an ice cream with friends, something like that, my parents would just give me money. When I got a little older and was a teenager, because I'm the oldest of 8 kids, I had the opportunity to babysit a lot, and my parents would pay me for that, which I really appreciated. They would give me the family rate, which was $3 an hour, and I liked that. I liked that I could earn money, and I liked that I was able to babysit, so that worked out well for me. For our kids' allowance, we really kind of talked about and thought about why do we want to give them this money and what are the purposes? And the purposes that we came up with were that we wanted them to learn to budget and to manage their money. And we also didn't want their expenses to throw off our budget. So we didn't want them coming to us and saying, oh, I have this expense, and maybe we had already planned our budget for the month and we didn't have that worked in and didn't want to have to give them extra. So what we decided to do for their allowance, and this is for our 2 older kids, I'll talk a little more about that later, but this is for our 13-year-old son and our 14-year-old daughter. We've been doing this for about the last year, and we decided to give them a big increase in their allowance. I'll tell you, at the risk of sounding cheap, I will tell you the actual numbers we used. So before that point, they were getting, and in fact, I can't remember what they used to get, but it was less than $10 a month, because this is just basically money they could spend on candy or whatever they decided to spend it on. We decided to increase their allowance to cover some certain things. So we would continue to pay for their food, their basic toiletries, bedding, the house expenses, basic living expenses, but they were going to be responsible for any school expenses, things like a yearbook or school dances or any field trip money that came up. Now, we only did this with our oldest, so field trips come up a lot more with the younger kids, but if that happens, it's usually kind of a fun one. In middle school, they just went to a water park, and so those kind of things they are responsible for. Their clothes, their shoes, any fun money if they want to go to the movies or do something fun with friends, gifts for anyone in their family or friend, gifts, their phone service, haircuts, and any extra toiletries, so like makeup for my daughter, stuff like that. So they're responsible for all those. Now, they're also responsible to pay tithing and savings. So the first 10% of their income goes to tithing, and then the next 10% goes to savings. So what we did to figure out how much money they should get per month is we sat down and added up what we were spending through the year. So we said, okay, for school clothes, we spend about this much in the year, and then we spend this much on phone and this much on yearbook, and we added all these things up, and then we divided it by 12, and the number that we came up with was $40 a month. Now, some of you are going to think that is super low, and it probably is on the low end. There's a reason for that. In fact, I'll talk a little more about that later too, about why it's kind of on the low end. But you might all be wondering, how can they even do all those things on $40 a month? So I want to tell you some of my kids' savings hacks that keep them in their budget. So one of those is Tracfone. My son doesn't pay for phone service. He has a phone. It's an old phone of mine, and it uses Wi-Fi, so he can text on that when he's home, but he can't text when he's out, and that works just fine for him. That's all he wants, and great. I'm happy about that. So my daughter, on the other hand, uses Tracfone, and the thing that I really like about Tracfone for her is it's not a set monthly fee, so she doesn't have to pay $30 a month or a certain rate per month. You pay per use. So if she's texting a lot, she's going to pay a little bit more. If she's short on funds, she can text a little bit less or call a little bit less or use less data. She has that option, and I think that that's a really powerful option for her because it allows her to be in control and not be locked in to a certain amount. So that's been really good for her. The other way that they stay in their budget is by really shopping sales, being aware of where the good deals are, getting, frequent purchaser cards and clubs like places have, and getting all those things. Also just knowing the sales cycles for clothes, shopping the clearance racks, all that kind of stuff. They also can choose and sometimes choose to make sacrifices. So sometimes they will do without things, or like my son, for his haircuts, he usually likes to go in. He has a barber that he likes to go to, but if he doesn't have the money, he can have dad give him a haircut, and dad does a good job, so that works out. He can get a haircut from James. Now, this $40 a month amount is a smallish amount. It's kind of a small amount to do all those things, but that is really intentional. That's on purpose. I feel like it would be sending our kids the wrong message if we gave them enough money to just cover all their wants. Because I don't know about for you, but for us, that's not how money has worked. You don't always have all the money that you want to cover all the things you want to do. And so we want it to be an exercise in budgeting and in figuring out where this money can go and how to make it stretch. And if there's not enough money, how to earn more. And our kids do have opportunities to earn more. Both Karissa and Kyle, which are our two oldest, are able to babysit almost once a week. Karissa usually babysits for our date night, and Kyle usually babysits while I podcast. So he just gets to babysit the baby while I'm recording episodes. Anyway, they have this opportunity presented to them, and so they can earn that money. They don't have to. Sometimes they will have other plans and not want to do it, and we have to hire someone else, and that's fine. But they do have that opportunity. So logistically, I'll tell you sort of how we break this down and how it all works. At the beginning of the month is when we give them their money. So it's their payday. And the two kids get their money differently. That is because when we started this a year ago, the bank said that you have to be 13 years old to have a checking account. I don't know if that's a universal rule across all banks or if it's just at our bank, but that is how it worked out. So we were able to set up a checking account for Karissa. And so we sit down at the computer and we transfer money from our bank account to her bank account. She gets $40. She's able to pay her tithing online, transfer money to savings online. And then we have a spreadsheet also on the computer, and she goes through and she looks at each category and decides where she wants her money to go throughout the month. So she'll see, how she's doing on her phone service, if she needs to add money there, or she'll look at the events coming up or the clothes that she wants to buy, all those things, and sets out her budget for the month. So she has a general idea of what she wants her budget to be, but then she makes it out specifically for the month and makes that plan. For Kyle, he does all of his money in cash. And so we'll give him money in cash. We have to have lots of small bills because the next step for him is to break it all down into different envelopes. So he has a drawer and it has Kyle's allowance, Kyle's short-term savings, and he's working on saving toward a bow for archery. It has money for Kyle's haircut or for school clothes or for other things that he's working on. So he breaks that money all down. And then when he needs a haircut, he goes to his haircut envelope and makes sure that he has enough to do that. So he's able to really see that visually, and that's been good for him. But now that he's older, we should probably think about getting him his own checking account in the future. The nice thing about the checking account is that it comes with a debit card, and the kids can use that instead of carrying around cash. So that is kind of nice if they're ready for that level of responsibility. Some things that we've seen as we've implemented this budgeting and allowance strategy with our kids. Number one, I think I've really seen a lot of increased gratitude, and that has been an awesome thing to see as a parent. When in the past, when we would give our kids presents that were practical, shoes or clothes, they were grateful, but the level of gratitude has definitely increased because they know that if they want a pair of shoes, they're going to have to buy those themselves. And so if they get those shoes as a gift, it's a whole new level of gratitude. I guess it's the whole idea of less entitlement and less expectation, right? They don't necessarily, those shoes weren't coming their way anyway, necessarily. If they wanted those shoes, they were responsible to get them for themselves. So to have that given as a gift makes them feel that gratitude and appreciation for it. So I've really loved seeing that in our kids. Sometimes at Christmas, Santa will put socks or underwear in the stockings, and Santa's pretty practical sometimes. But the kids didn't used to be very excited by that. I would say that has changed. This last Christmas, there was a lot more excitement because, I needed new socks. And they were excited because they needed them and they didn't have to buy them with their own money. So that represented something of actual value to them. Number two thing that I've seen with our kids is it really helps them to understand the value of money. Having them be responsible for it really makes it real to them. They get an understanding of how far this amount of money will actually go. And they understand what else it could be used for. So one example that came to mind is our son, Kyle. It was time to buy the yearbook. And at his school, the yearbook costs $30. He's in middle school. And he said, I can't afford the yearbook. We were really surprised because we knew he had a lot of money, and come to find out he had $100 on his dresser. And so we said, no, son, you have enough money. You can definitely buy the yearbook. And he said, well, I don't really want a yearbook. It's not worth $30 to me. That was pretty enlightening for us as parents. We've always bought him a yearbook because he was happy to spend our $30 on a yearbook. But when it came right down to it, it didn't mean enough to him to spend his $30 on a yearbook. It wasn't that he didn't have the money. It was that he didn't feel that it was worth it. The value wasn't there for him. So he's getting an understanding of what is important to him and what he really values and what is worth spending his money on. So that's a really great lesson for him and also for us as parents to see what he values. Number 3 is creativity and innovation. So I have seen my kids really get creative in a lot of ways. And one of those ways is that sometimes they'll think they need something for school or a project they're working on. And the tendency in the past would have been to say, Mom, go to the store and get me this thing. Hopefully they ask nicer than that, but they would ask for me to go buy something new. Well, when they know that they have to buy it, they're a lot more likely to use something they already have instead of buying something new. Trish Merle was on the call a month or two or three ago, and she talked about the Taker Trade, which is a great program that we have in our area to basically it's like a thrift shop, but no money, so you can go there and get used clothes for your kids. So Kyle didn't used to be a huge fan of the Taker Trade. He would rather have his clothes new, but since he's in charge of buying his own clothes now, he really likes it when we stop by the Taker Trade and look for clothes for him, because that represents a savings and then he's able to spend his money on other things. So he appreciates that. Karissa did something neat with our church group. I don't know if the whole intention of this was to get new clothes, but it was at least part of it. She set up an activity for about, I want to say, probably about 40 girls, and asked them all to bring the clothes that they'd outgrown or didn't like anymore or anything like that, and to bring them to this church activity. They set them all out, and then the girls just got to go around and shop and get new outfits. And Carissa came home with all these cute clothes and was able to really spruce up her wardrobe from this activity that she put together. And I love seeing that creativity. It also helped the other girls too, so it was a great thing. Another thing I've seen my kids get creative with is gifts. They will sometimes, if they get a gift that's not just their thing, instead of opening it and playing with it a little, maybe they save it and they wait for that perfect opportunity to give it to someone else. People might frown on regifting. I think it's awesome. Give something a home where it really is going to fit and is a good fit and where people can use it. So I think that's awesome. They also are creative with making gifts and finding things that they already have or doing service for gifts or other things like that to really stretch their budget and still do things for other people. Another way that they have been a little more creative since we've started doing this budget is in finding ways to earn money. So we've seen them make things to sell or offer to do things for the neighbors or different things so that they can earn money and increase that money that they have, so they're not just locked into that $40 a month. They're able to really use other monies to accomplish the things they want to do and to save up for the things they're saving on. So that's what I've seen with the kids, and I've been impressed with how they've handled it and with how it's gone. We've also learned a few lessons as parents. Probably the biggest one of those is that it is really hard not to want to step in and save your kids. This happens in a lot of ways. So when you see them spending their money on junk, just something that's cheaply made and you just know it's not a very good investment, it's really hard not to want to make that decision. But the most powerful lesson that kids can learn is by making that decision and living with the consequences, because you can be pretty sure that after that they're going to buy things that are better quality. On the other hand, they might just decide it was worth it for them. And even though it was poorly made, that was just what they wanted. And so as parents, to have to take that little step back and not be the boss of deciding how they spend their money has been a good lesson and kind of a hard one for us to learn. I think the other thing that happens is when the kids have spent all their money and then they have a fun opportunity. Recently this came up when we had some friends visit and the kids wanted to go with them to an amusement park, but they didn't have the money to pay for it. And it was really hard not to want to give them the money so that they could go. But we didn't. And that was a hard thing. And again, a good lesson for us to not step in and not save them with money, but to just let the natural consequences happen. One other thing with this way of doing allowance is we only do it with our two oldest kids because we felt like they were the only ones that were mature enough to be responsible for all these purchasing decisions. I was afraid if we did it with our elementary boys that they would never buy new clothes because they don't really care what they wear. If you've seen them, you know that's true. And they're happy to wear dirty clothes if they find them on the floor. So I didn't want them to just keep wearing raggy, holey clothes, and wanted to make sure that if they needed new clothes that we were taking care of that for them. A friend started doing this system and her 9-year-old wanted to participate, and so she said they're doing a modified version where she gets a little more money and has a little more responsibilities, but she's not responsible for all of her purchases. So that's kind of a good way to do this same idea, but to make sure that your child is ready for the level of responsibility that they have. So overall, it's been a really great thing for our family. I think that the thing I like the best about it is it's a really good way to teach the lessons that we want them to learn about finances. I like having them learn these lessons while they're under our roof and understand how to manage and budget money now instead of later when they're in college. I feel like this is kind of a jump start, so when they're living on their own, they'll really have a better idea and be better prepared for all those big financial decisions that come after high school. So let me know if you decide to try it and how it goes, and if you have any questions, and I will see you all next week on Moms Who Know. Thank you all so much for listening to this episode and being a part of Moms Who Know. I hope that you enjoyed that as much as I did. I wanted to let you know about some resources on the website. You're going to want to go to momswhoknowpodcast.com and go to free resources. I've recently added a brand new, it's a big list of activities to add to your morning routine. So if morning routine is something that you're working on, you'll want to go there. You'll see a few other resources there as well. So go check it out and we'll see you next week.